In the 1960s, we'll start there. In the South and Southwest, it was very, very common for funeral homes and or private ambulance companies to provide emergency ambulance service. There was very little training as far as care for the patient is concerned. It was kind of a dog-eat-dog type affair. We used to joke about it, and I speak with great authority because I worked in funeral homes prior to my entry into the fire department, as well as private ambulance companies, and so I made an awful lot of calls. And back in those days, it was kind of like a high-speed horizontal taxi ride.
At the time, what you had was the private ambulance companies that were just a load-and-go system, and racing. They raced each other to the scene.
The ambulance got to the scene of an accident, say, and there are two people involved. One of them was severely wounded, broken up, and the other was dead. Well, the dead guy got the first ride because it was better for the mortuary, and then they would come back to get the injured person to take to the nearest emergency room.
Being at a wreck or a bad fire, it was, you felt kind of helpless that you could not do more for the person that was injured or burnt. So it was hard. It was hard to see the patient there, of course, crying or screaming, and you're standing there. How can I help you to comfort you? You know. But that's what, at the time, that's the way it was.
I mean, folks that were either in car wrecks or were injured or having heart attacks would just, whoever got there, whatever private ambulance got there first, they were just slapped on their stretcher and hauled to the hospital.
And then in the late 1960s, the United States Department of Transportation did a study, and they showed that nationwide, that 60% of people who were handled by ambulance personnel or involved in accidents or sudden illnesses or whatever, 60% of these people died. They said, we have a problem and here's how we can solve that problem.
In May of 1972, the Texas Medical Association met in San Antonio Convention Hall. They had a lot of items of interest to doctors, and there was a brand new shiny Modulance from Houston. And I ran into a doctor from Houston who is very instrumental in starting the EMS system in Houston, and he told me all about their experience and what an upgrade that had been for emergency care.
They were fast. They had big engines, so we got to drive fast, but they were pretty sparsely equipped.
Well, the Modulance is simply a pickup chassis with a box on the back of it, and the box has room for 2 stretchers, and it has all sorts of basic emergency equipment. A good friend of mine, Dr. Bill Center, was the president of the Bexar County Medical Society, and I told him, Bill, you need to go down and see this new Modulance. It's a whole upgraded system of taking care of injuries, and we need something like that here. He said, we'll form a committee of the Medical Society, and you're the chairman.
And so they took this plan and they presented it to the city government here. And they said, here's the problem, here's how we can solve the problem. We're going to have an EMS system, or we recommend that we have an EMS system. The city bought this, they bought the concept.
And they put together curriculum with some cardiologists and some trauma doctors, and we did 2 months of training.
I remember teaching them how to start IVs. And, I always said, they were great guys who stepped up.
The cardiologist taught us to read EKGs and to understand the cardiovascular system and the all the things that could go wrong with it, and to recognize these signs and symptoms.
And so we were teaching them the importance of doing small steps to save. We also taught them how to put on splints and how to put on tractions. And
by the time we got everybody trained and got I think 7 modulances to begin with, we went on the road on March the 1st of 1974. So it's a 22-month span from the time the initial decision till we were in action. It would be staffed by 2 emergency medical technicians, and they would be able to begin emergency care right at the scene of the accident and continue it on the way to the nearest hospital.
We were busy. There were only 7 ambulances, 7 units in the city and county. We were covering Bexar County also.
It was exciting because we didn't know what we were getting into. And of course, when we started, we had it was difficult going from not knowing anything, medically, and then going with a heart doctor, Dr. Talley, Dr. Rockwell, our orthopedic doctor, and all the other doctors that we went through. They would help us out so much, and just an eye-opener.
The nurses figured we knew what a hyperventilator was. A lot of us didn't. And we found that out quickly the first time we made one. We thought the guy was having a severe heart attack. And when we pulled up to the emergency room, the nurses said, it's just a hyperventilator.
So to make 25, 30 runs a shift was common.
The biggest challenge was trying to stay awake, because we were pulling 24 hours and then we'd do another 12-hour overtime. So that was a big challenge, just, staying awake and keeping up with the calls. It was nonstop. We would not get a break. We were out of 7, so we were running the 24 hours. You might spend maybe 30 minutes at the station.
Most challenging part was just trying to get out there and do what we had been taught without having any real practical experience.
We started with 7 units, and we only had 2 defibrillators, the 24s and 7s, for that first 7 months, and we were doing the whole county.
so I was their teacher for 2 years on the truck and at the station. And we wrote their standards of care, their protocols, and then we made runs with them to make sure their quality was there.
And the nurses I know at University Hospital were very, very interested in training us. So we did a lot of our training there in the emergency room, actually learned how to intubate and start IVs and evaluate patients and stuff like that. So it was preparing us for that date in March the 1st when we're going to hit the streets.
The stress was tremendous. You'd always, I remember making runs, and then you second guess yourself. If I would have done this different, the outcome would have been different.
The death and dying was a big part of it. You saw a lot of that. And it was hard for some of the guys to take.
And especially if you worked a heart attack, that was, you're in front of all the family, and they're looking at you, and they're crying, and we're trying our best to do what we have to do. And then we know as we're doing the work, or with the patient, it's not working, but you just keep doing what you're doing, and never give up. Medina River, and there was 2 young boys, maybe 10, 11 years old, and they were sitting on the embankment, and they slipped. They were wearing combat boots. They slipped. They're 7 foot of water. They slipped in, and we caught it as a drowning. And the father jumped in, and he barely made it. But the boys, when we pulled them out, when the mother's there, we're in the ambulance. We had to call for a backup, and we're doing CPR, and water's coming out from ears and nose, everything. And the mother's screaming at me, just screaming, "Is he going to live?" And in your heart, it's not going to happen. But it was really difficult, And there was so many of them. But that one was really stuck in my head.
It turned out to be, I guess, something that San Antonio never had. One of the things the nurses used to say is that now we're seeing patients coming in here that are viable. You know, before the old ambulance companies would just throw them on a stretcher and haul to the hospital.
Today's paramedics, I have had occasion to use them and have called them to my home, and I've been extremely impressed with them. I mean, they come in and they just, they've got all this equipment now and all these drugs that we never even thought about having. And they come in like gangbusters, and you know, they've got it going, the EKG's going, another one's taking a report, and generally from what I've seen, the firefighters are much more involved in it now.
It's a lot of advancements. So we got, like I said, power stretcher, you got the Lucas device, you have the cadaver lab, you have the whole blood, and the advancement of all these medications that are now out in the units. Paramedics raising the patient from the ground up to get that patient up on to the ambulance. Now the power stretcher, it has battery operated, so it assists on your lifting, so it helps everybody and saves your back. That's how the power stretchers came into play here. And also we have the Lucas device, which helps the patient when we're doing CPR. Instead of manual compressions, it's the mechanical compressions. To have healthy paramedics is to have good medical response out there, because you don't want someone that's hurting all the time that can't bend over and do their job while you're on an emergency. Well, the success rate has really gone up, I could tell you that. That's regarding the medications that we carry. In the beginning, we carried like maybe 5 or 10. Now we're up to like almost 40 medications that we carry.
So 5 years ago, San Antonio Fire Department was the first metropolitan EMS system to have a blood transfusion available for every person in the San Antonio region that was in need of blood. We've saved many lives since we've deployed the whole blood transfusions. Everyone should know this story. Tiffany Kieschnick was in a car wreck and she was bleeding from her spleen. And she was trapped in the car, so we could not get her to definitive care at the trauma center. We were trying to cut her out of the car and she went into cardiac arrest. And we pulled her quickly out, transfused her with blood, and she went from a PEA rate back to a perfusing rhythm. She had a pulse. So she was dead, she was alive from whole blood. So truly a success story. Frankly, a terrible tragedy was averted because we had this novel life-saving treatment on our ambulances here in San Antonio.
So we have 10 different programs at MIH. We started in 2014. Well, actually, I got here in 2014. And that was one of the first big projects that we started. We started with the high volume utilizers. Those are patients that are gold card customers, ones that call 911 a lot. And so that's where we started to try and case manage these very complicated patients, usually that have very complicated medical histories that aren't interacting with the healthcare system properly. And so what we did is we went to their house, we did home safety assessments, we did check their meds, see what kind of durable medical equipment they need, fall risk assessment, and we tried to work with that patient, their doctors, and navigate them into our healthcare system so they're not calling 911 for things that they could go see a family doctor for or go to urgent care. As always, you know, we're a really progressive fire department, as you've seen in other videos, things like whole blood, our whole dispatch process, where we're actually providing telehealth services from dispatch, and then even navigate them to a telemedicine doctor now with our partnership with RightSight. I think that's another big thing that will help us to try and get the right patient to the right place, to the right venue, at the right price, at the right time interval for care, rather than just calling 911 and transporting to emergency room. So I'm pretty excited that we're going to be changing the way that we provide service in a very different way from what we used to do, which is one call, we haul, we take to the emergency room. And now we're going to do it better.
2 months ago, we had a 9-month-old drowned. Horrible. The dispatch just The mother was frantic, as she should be. They didn't know exactly how to save the baby. We took that from what is our traditional telephone 911 call. We took that to the Good Sam app. You show that video, and when we saw this 9-month-old being held by dad, we said, baby had drowned in the bathtub. We said, put the baby on the ground, hold your hand here, and mom is holding the phone, and we can see, and push like this, push this fast. 15 seconds later, baby takes a breath and opens his eyes and starts to move his arms. We put the baby in the rescue position, and baby is alive today. Baby is fine today. I've talked to mom about this. Obviously, the most harrowing thing you would never want any parent to ever have to go through, any person to ever have to go through. And this baby is alive because of this brand new technology that only San Antonio Fire Department at this point has deployed in the country. I think if I had one thing to tell the people of San Antonio or any of our millions of visitors to San Antonio, is that San Antonio Fire Department truly does the right thing. We train for the 1%. We spend a lot of time training for the 1%, the worst day of most people's lives. And when we get there, we want to do our best job, and I think we do. What we do here is not about awards, but what we do here does win awards. And we have won in 2019 the EMS World EMS System of the Year Award of Excellence. And right after that, in 2020, we won the Congressional Fire Service EMS System of the Year Award. Those awards are nice. They are just awards, but they are a symbol of what this department represents. I'm very proud to be a part of that.
I was doing a job that needed to be done, and I was doing it, hopefully doing it well. You know, there's that satisfaction knowing, and the satisfaction of knowing that I saved a lot of people's lives.
You would be stopped at the grocery store and say, thanks for helping my dad. You guys really saved his life. You say, okay, thank you. You don't remember who they were. It might have been years later, but you know, they remember you. So that's a good feeling that keeps on giving, you know, as long as as people remember the deeds that you did.
To deliver a baby. And my hands were shaking so bad. We put the OP kit out and we were getting ready, here comes the baby. And I told my wife, you know, I know that baby wasn't mine, but I felt like I was the father for that baby. You know, it was just a beautiful moment for me.
I think I'm most proud of those days where we were all sitting in the room together trying to figure out how to make this emergency response system work.
I never in my life would expect to have been a paramedic or even, you know, I was a firefighter. That's why I joined the fire department, you know, where the EMS came, and it changed my life. It definitely changed my life.
I'm happy with what I did. I'm sorry I had to retire, but you know, you can only do it so long. And I'm proud that I served 34 years.
Being the first class of EMS, and to know the day that 50 years later, the EMS that is present now, I'm very proud to have to the paramedics that they have now.
Oh my God, I would have never thought when we started where we are now. But I think that's the beauty of watching what happened. You know, it's a system now.
Congratulations on 50 years of EMS. Come a long ways.